What's going on? We're back. Boom breakdown. We're going to do a little recap of the UFC Sweden card. Also talk about UFC 238 in Chicago. Really great card coming up. And we'll get to some fan questions and then we'll finish it off. But yeah, to start with UFC Sweden, Alexander Gustafsson retires after a loss to Anthony Smith. Uh, some people don't quite believe him. Some people do. I personally believe him. I think he's done. I don't know what it is, but I just feel like something seemed a little off with him. Who's to say if he's injured and he doesn't want to disclose that, and maybe he's battling with stuff outside of the cage and doesn't really want to let that out to the media or to the public. But it's hard to say. I'm not really quite sure how to pinpoint it. I will say he looked physically a little bit different than when he went into the first fight with Jones. He doesn't look as in shape as he did then. I don't know if that has to do with injuries or has to do with motivation, but he seems to state in his post-fight interview, in his press conference, that he just doesn't have it anymore, and that might mean that he's not right up here mentally, and he's just not feeling the same way about competition, and with the same excitement, and that could be a big factor. You still want to try to go in and fight and make money, but you have to deal with the psychological aspect of the sport before you go in there and fight at the upper echelon. And props to Anthony Smith for getting it done. I mean, Gustafsson didn't look terrible in the fight. He was having some success. They both started pretty slow, feeling each other out. We've seen Gustafsson a bit more active with his hands, more aggressive with his boxing. And, it took him time to open up, but he landed a couple nice takedowns. Anthony Smith was able to get up from there, and he had good pressure game going on Gustafsson, who was moving side to side really well, but just wasn't really aggressive enough. It seemed like both of them were kind of waiting on the other one, trying to figure things out. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he's just lost interest or lost motivation in training, or if he's injured, Chael Sonnen mentioned. He thinks something's up behind the scenes that we're not hearing about. That's just speculation, but could be true. Boomachino, baby. We got a cold brew today. It's hot outside. Beautiful day. I like my iced coffees in the summertime. But, yeah, so Gustafsson's done. Now we talk about who's next for Anthony Smith, right? I think you got to go with the Luke Rockhold fight. They had a little bit of a back and forth at that press conference, that big press conference they had. And, Anthony Smith clearly doesn't like Luke Rockhold. And I think Luke Rockhold could say the same thing about Anthony Smith. He's had some, words to say about him. And I think that that's a fight that a lot of fans would want to see. I think that's a good style matchup fight as well. And that's a good fight to see where Rockhold is in the division, because Anthony Smith coming off a win against Gustafsson, I mean, where else do you put him? He's really in line to get another fight against John Jones at some point, but they're not going to give that to him anytime soon. John Jones is trying to clear out the division. He's got up and coming guys that are going to be challenging him. He's got to deal with what's his name, Thiago Santos next, and I think in the meantime we got Rockhold versus Jan Blachowicz. And if Rockhold could win that fight, I think that's the matchup you make. You make Rockhold versus Anthony Smith, and the winner is right there in line for a title shot. I mean, Rockhold's a new guy in the division coming up from 185, so that's an interesting aspect. We'd probably want to see a new guy like that challenge John Jones. He's got a good style for it. He's big for 185, so he's not going to be too small for a light heavyweight division. So, yeah, I say you go with Rockhold versus Smith and see what happens with that. Otherwise, another big fucking knockout on that card, man. I really was worried about what's his name, got fucking his head smashed on the canvas. It was bad, man. But I don't know why I'm drawing a blank right now. It was Jimmy Manoa, Rakic, man. That guy looked fast for the weight class. He looked technical. He looked powerful. That guy's definitely a prospect coming up who's going to do big things in the light heavyweight division. That knockout was brutal. That high left kick set up by the uppercut. Very nice work. Beautiful striking. And I was just really worried about Manoa after that, seeing how hard he hit his head on the canvas and how long he was down for. That's just brutal shit right there. And that's going to take a lot of time for, for Manoa to recover and psychologically get back after that. Who's to know, who's to say, like, how he's going to deal with that after, dealing with a brutal knockout like that. And I think he's dealt with a couple of them, too, so it's not just one. Those things add up, man. His chin's probably not going to be the same, and you got to think about your future, your health, and at that point, it's tough to be in the fight business, the hurt business, when you're starting to think about shit like that. Another big win. Amir Khani submits Chris Fishgold. That fight was really slow for a little while. It was a lot of bad blood before the fight, too. It was interesting to see. They were heated up at the weigh-ins, forehead to forehead, pushing each other. And then in the fight, they're giving each other respect more than most competitors do in the middle of a fight. So I found that to be a kind of an interesting thing. But Fishgold, nonetheless, a high-level black belt. He has a slick guillotine, but Amir Khani's the guy who makes a slick transition from guillotine to anaconda choke. It was amazing work, man. As soon as Fishgold went to roll out of the guillotine, Amir Khani locks up that anaconda, and they're rolling and spinning on the ground. Fishgold's trying to spin away and keep the hips away, and Amir Khani's trying to close the hips in and crunch that anaconda choke. And eventually it just gets too tight on Fishgold. He taps. And really big submission win for Amir Khani. He was off for a while. He took a ton of amateur boxing fights, he said. And ironically, he gets a submission victory after all the boxing work that he put in. But still, very impressive stuff. Excited to see where he goes from here. Wasn't the best overall performance, in my opinion. But you know what? You take that long off, that long of a layoff, it's going to take a little while to get comfortable in there again sometimes. So maybe that was a factor, but great victory for him. The Mr. Finland right there. Then you got one of the most underrated guys at lightweight, Leonardo Santos, knocks out Stevie Ray with a beautiful pullback right hand. And he runs out of the cage and he pretty much just leaves the building. I don't know what they do about that, but in some commissions, that's you're getting fined for just jumping the cage. So I imagine you're getting fined for running out all the way back to the locker room. But beautiful knockout nonetheless, and one of the most underrated guys at lightweight. I mean, I don't know, what is he, 7-1 in the lightweight division. He has a lot of finishes. He's obviously got knockout power, as we see. Now, he fought Stevie Ray. Stevie Ray obviously not in the upper echelon of the division, but a game fighter who's done well in the UFC, who obviously is hard to put away. And Leonardo Santos puts him away early and quick, and sharp, quick, fast right hand, man. That was really impressive. Highly skilled technician on the feet. And watch out for this guy, man. I think they're going to give him a big matchup next. I'd like to see him fight one of the guys in the top 15 and make a name for himself. I think he deserves it. He's put a lot of wins in there, and give this guy someone big. Who else we got? What other big notable wins on the card? I think that's it for now. We'll go into a little bit of the UFC 238 card. We got so many big fights on this card. Henry Cejudo versus Marlon Moraes. You got Valentina Shevchenko versus Jessica Ai for the women's flyweight title. You got Tony Ferguson versus Donald Cerrone. Amazing fight right there, man. Donald Cerrone's looked amazing ever since he had a kid. I guess that's what you got to do these days to fucking step up your game. But Tony Ferguson being on that layoff, going through the mental issues, and now glad to see him healthy, back in action where he belongs in the cage. He seems to be healthy and happy from what social media says. And what an exciting fight, man. Two guys in their prime, two guys at the top of their game. And this is going to put either one of those guys in line for a title shot next against either Dustin Poirier or Khabib. Unless the UFC pulls some crazy shit and throws Conor in there. You never know. If Poirier wins, that sets up, a storyline between Conor with a rematch fight. I really hope they don't do that. I hope they go, the right direction, and you got to give either Tony Ferguson or Donald Cerrone the next shot. Whoever wins this fight earned their shot, and you can't go any other way. You got Jimmy Rivera versus Peter Yan. Peter Yan's been running through the division. They're moving this kid up fast. He's got a very high level aggression and striking. He trains in Thailand, very high level Muay Thai over there, and the guy just seems to be a killer. He takes shots to give shots. He's not afraid to get in the exchange, but I think that's a good style fight for Jimmy Rivera, who fights better against guys who are willing to exchange with him, get in the pocket a little bit. He's got powerful boxing. He's well trained out of Tiger Schulman's. They got a good team over there. Really excited to see this little bantamweight tournament they got going on for UFC 238. Tai Tuivasa versus Blagoy Ivanov. That's another big fight right there for the heavyweights. And on the prelims, you got Tatiana Suarez, who's tearing up the strawweight division. She gets a win over Nina Ansaroff. She's going to be in line for a title shot next, too, I feel. Aljamain Sterling versus Pedro Munoz. These guys are fighting for a title shot as well. A lot of big, high-profile fights on this card, where meaningful fights, where if you get a win, you're putting yourself in line to change your life and to get a title shot, and that's very important stuff right there. This high stakes on this card. I really excited to see this card. Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Alexa Grasso. Kowalkiewicz has taken a couple of downfalls, and Alexa Grasso seems to be on the up climb right now, so that's an important, pivotal fight for both of those women as well. Ricardo Lamas versus Calvin Kattar. That's a sick striking fight right there. I think if Ricardo Lamas is smart, he's going to look to use his wrestling. He's a very athletic fighter. He's fought the best of the best at featherweight, and he's coming off a victory, and Calvin Kattar's looked really hot as a prospect, and he's had really crisp, fast, lightning striking, and really excited to see how Ricardo Lamas deals with the young lion in this fight. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about Henry Cejudo versus Marlon Moraes. Obviously, Henry Cejudo's coming off the victory over T.J. Dillashaw, which we later come to find that T.J.'s tested positive for PEDs. So that makes the win even bigger, in my opinion, for Henry Cejudo. Coming up from flyweight, the smaller guy, knocking out T.J. Dillashaw. Oh no, I mean, well, T.J. coming down from bantamweight and being the bigger guy still. He said he came in the cage at like 149, which is pretty damn big for a flyweight. And, goes to show that weight cut could really hurt you, doing that extra 10 pounds and having like no body fat to do so. Your brain probably is not fully hydrated going in there, and that could be a reason why he was easily rocked in the fight. I really didn't see a clean, hard shot land to wobble him at first. It seemed like it took not much to wobble him, and that says a lot, because TJ takes shots and he gets in there and he has a pretty good chin at bantamweight. So he's gotten hit by Cody Garbrandt and recovered in fights. That says a lot. So I think that was a factor. But man, hats off to Henry Cejudo. What a resurrection of a career. He obviously had a lot of heat behind him, coming into the UFC as an Olympic gold medalist and coming into the flyweight division with big expectations and losing to, Demetrius Johnson. It really was hard, for someone like that to deal with a lot of pressure on your shoulders to fulfill the shoes of a gold medalist and have to take that downfall, but then comes back and just murders people. He started changing up his style to a karate style, working with Eric Albarrahassan. They've had a dynamic duo going. I love hearing both of them talk. It's kind of funny. It's growing on me. I like hearing both of those guys make jokes, and very well thought out speakers as well. They're good talkers. They really create drama with the way that they explain things and stuff, and I like hearing that kind of stuff. So them two doing amazing stuff. With Henry striking has grown leaps and bounds. He's been knocking people out, hurting guys, and beats Demetrius Johnson in a rematch fight, out wrestles him, wins by points, but looks great. And then he comes out and he beats TJ Dillashaw, one of the best bantamweights in the world. And now here is Henry Cejudo trying to claim the 135-pound title. What an amazing story. After coming in and losing to Demetrius, and now look where he's at, and he has a chance to become one of the pound-for-pound greats in the sport. And but he's got a tough task. Marlon Moraes is a very high-level striker with speed and power. He gets those kicks up there like none other. He has that amazing switch kick to the head, who he's knocked out Aljamain Sterling with. He knocked out Jimmy Rivera with the same thing. He's really big for the weight class for 135. I think he walks around in the high 160s. And Henry Cejudo's a strong 125er, though. He's not a small 125er. You can't underestimate this guy. He knocked out TJ Dillashaw, who was the bantamweight champ. Yes, TJ came down from 125, but you really got to give him that credit. And you cannot look at Henry Cejudo as a flyweight, as a too small of a guy type of thing. If you underestimate him, if you're Marlon Moraes, that's a big mistake. But I don't think Marlon will. I think Marlon is hot right now, coming off a win against a Sun Tzu. I think he's taking Henry serious, and I think he's going to try to knock him out, man. And I think Henry really has to use his wrestling. He has to be smart in this fight. I don't think he should go strike for strike with Moraes. I think he should really try to tire out Moraes with wrestling, feints, takedowns, and maybe not even get the takedown, but get the clinch. Try to wear him out a little bit. I think he'll have more success in the striking if he can do that early. Because let's be honest, Moraes is a high-level black belt as well. He submitted a Sun Tzu in his last fight, who I don't know who else has submitted a Sun Tzu, if anybody. I don't think anybody else has. So that was really impressive. You got to watch out for Moraes' jiu-jitsu. If you're Henry Cejudo and you're trying to wrestle him, you got to watch out for chokes. You got to watch out for submissions, and be aware at all times when you're in that guard of Moraes. If I'm going to make a pick right now, I think I'm going to go with Moraes. I think he's got the size, he's got the striking, and I think he has the athleticism and the ability in a camp with Frankie Edgar and Zabit and all those guys over there in Jersey. You got high level enough wrestlers to help you out, and bigger wrestlers at that, to help you with Henry's style. I think he's going to be able to negate that wrestling a little bit. Maybe Henry will get a couple takedowns, but I think Moraes will get back to his feet without taking too much damage. And I think that he'll be able to inflict his striking and pretty much hurt Henry at some point with either a kick or a knee or something like that, with Henry coming in, changing levels. I'm going to go with Moraes by TKO. Valentina Shevchenko, Jessica Ai. Shevchenko, what a amazing striker, but she's shown leaps and bounds in her grappling as well, and she's a very strong woman for the weight class. Jessica Ai also pretty physically strong, and she's grown a lot as well, and Valentina's just on another level, in my opinion, as far as speed and power goes with striking. I think Jessica Ai has superior boxing skills, but I think Shevchenko has the way more diverse game in striking all around. And I think that her clinch game has looked amazing, her trips, her top pressure on the ground, and I think it's going to be trouble for Jessica Ai. I really don't think Jessica Ai's faced anybody like her. Jessica Ai made the move to Vegas. She's training at Extreme Couture under Gray Maynard. I saw is helping her out, coaching her with some grappling, which is great for her. It's nice to see people make changes when necessary. I think that's a big part of the sport. Some people hate on that. They are all about loyalty and sticking with your team from day one. But I feel when it comes to growth that the more eyes that you're around, the more ideas, the more coaching, the more different aspects of training and the different teams and the different training partners you can come across is probably the better for overall growth in the sport. Jessica I's made that change. She's over at Extreme Couture. Hopefully that'll help her out in this fight because you got a big challenge with Valentina, man. I think that's going to be a tough style matchup for her. Jessica I doesn't really look to engage too much in the grappling. And even if she does, I think Valentina has the edge with those trips and those throws. I'm going to go with Valentina by decision. Tony Ferguson, Donald Cerrone. Donald Cerrone, man, coming off a huge win over Ali Quinto, one of the toughest guys in the division. He just had a shutout performance against Kevin Lee. Donald Cerrone has a kid. He's a fucking terror now. He's running through young lions. He's running through old lions. He's running through everybody. The guy's mean in there. He starts a little bit slow, though, and that's the one thing in this fight that I feel if Tony Ferguson can take full advantage of, it's that first round. That first round is pivotal, key for Tony Ferguson to come out fast, get in Cerrone's face. Do not let him get comfortable. Do not let him get into his rhythm. Cerrone is not a guy that starts out the fight in his rhythm. It takes him a round or two to get into a rhythm, and that's when he becomes a fucking demolition man. You know, you don't want him to get into that striking rhythm. He starts chewing up your legs. He's throwing straight snap kicks to the chin. His hands are accurate. His hands are fast. And he gets those kicks up there behind those punches really well. So you really don't want to let Cerrone get into that rhythm. And I think Ferguson's the guy to stop that. Ferguson's a fast starter. He has amazing cardio. He's training up in Big Bear at altitude. And he shuts guys down, man. His pace is hard to deal with. The guy's funky, unpredictable. He's got those elbows and that weird striking. I give the overall pure striking technique advantage to Cerrone, but I give that grittiness and that unpredictable awkwardness to Tony Ferguson. If he can get in Cerrone's face really early, I think that'll make a big difference in this fight. If Tony Ferguson comes out a little slower because of his layoff and starts, you know, off, that's going to give Cerrone time to settle in the fight, start to gain confidence, and get really mean in there. And if he starts to pick apart Tony Ferguson, because his striking is a little bit more fluid and accurate, and he can really pick Tony Ferguson apart if he starts getting in that rhythm. Ferguson, amazing jiu-jitsu. Cerrone, amazing jiu-jitsu. Cerrone's wrestling has improved more than anything else, I feel, as he started in the UFC. You know, his wrestling takedown offense especially has been very much improved. He's a great striker, but when he wants to take guys down, he does it. He clinches up, he gets that body lock around you, those double underhooks, and he sucks you in and trips your legs, and he's amazing at taking the back. But I don't think Ferguson is a guy you want to fuck with on the ground. The guy's devastating with elbows. He'll cut you up. He's got triangles, arm bars. He's a funky 10th planet guy, and I don't think he's the guy you want to mess around with in jiu-jitsu on the mat. So I don't know if Cowboy will even think about taking the fight down. I think he'll look to keep it striking and try to stay on the outside of Ferguson and use those kicks and try to chew up Ferguson's knee. Ferguson came off a big surgery with that knee that was, you know, completely ripped off. So if I'm Cowboy Cerrone, I'm chewing the fuck out of that knee. I'm kicking that knee as much as I can early on in the fight. And, you know, Cerrone's got really hard, really fast leg kicks. So if I'm him, that's a big factor. I'm looking to hit those early on and throw Ferguson off. If you're Cerrone, you got to come out in this fight on fire. You cannot take the first round off. You cannot start slow. Yes, you can feel out Tony Ferguson a little bit and try to get in your range and control the fight, but you can't start slow, especially up here. Sometimes Cerrone is not in the fight yet. He says in the locker room, last fight against Iaquinta, granted he had a great performance, but he says, I just wasn't feeling it. I just didn't want to warm up. I didn't even really care. I didn't want to go out there and fight. It took me to the second round to want to fucking fight. And you don't want to let that happen against Ferguson. So for some reason, I feel like that's a habit of Cowboys. And I feel like that could be his downfall in this fight. And it's such a shame because he's put so much work in, coming back down to 155 from 170, beating guys like Hernandez and Ali Quinta, and, you know, now putting himself in line finally for that title shot after doing so much for the company. The guy's fought everybody they put in front of him at 170, at 155, never turns down fights. And I just feel like he's going to come up short in this fight against Ferguson. I hate to say it because I love Cowboy Cerrone, but I also do love Ferguson. Just feel like Ferguson's on another level, man, with his mentality of getting in these savage moments in these fights and finishing these guys. I feel like as the fight gets tougher and tougher, Ferguson gets more gritty and more vicious. And he starts like that early in the first round, and I think that's really why he's going to come out on top in this fight. I think he's going to get in Cerrone's face early. I think he knows about, the fact that Cerrone starts slow, and I think he's going to take full advantage of that. And I think he'll get the finish. I think it's just going to go downhill from there because Cerrone's not going to be able to get into his rhythm because of that. So I'm going with Tony Ferguson by TKO or by submission. I could see him hurting Cerrone and the fight ending up in a scramble and Ferguson locking up a Darce or something crazy on the ground. So I got Ferguson. Jimmy Rivera versus Peter Yan. Rivera coming off a big loss to Aljamain Sterling, but obviously Aljamain Sterling's style is way different than most guys in the bantamweight division. He's elusive. He's got great dexterity in his legs. His kicks are funky. He's throwing them out there at a high volume. It's hard to deal with. He's moving laterally side to side. It's hard to find him and get settled in the fight. He's obviously got the wrestling, and it seemed like Rivera just never got set in that fight, and I give that props to Aljamain for kind of keeping him off his game, the whole way. He was frustrating him. He was picking him apart from the outside and throwing funky, kicks with spinning back fists added to it. And Jimmy Rivera just never got started in that whole fight. But Yan's a different style. Yan is a guy that's going to get in Rivera's face. He uses a lot of forward pressure. He uses a lot of head movement, though, and feints. And he's a very high-level Muay Thai striker. And Jimmy Rivera kind of likes that. I feel like he wants the fight brought to him. He wants the exchange. He wants the fight in the pocket. That's where he does well. Jimmy Rivera is a very smart fighter. I don't think he's just going to throw caution to the wind against Yan. But I think that in this fight, Yan has shown he's gotten caught by Dodson. He got dropped by him in that fight. And I think Jimmy Rivera has a little bit more power in those hands than Dodson. So Yan's got to watch out. He can't get too reckless in this fight. He's got to use his smarts. And Yan has also showed great grappling skills. He's good at passing guard, getting to side control, landing elbows, and trapping arms from there. And he keeps a very high top pressure game when he gets guys down. Rivera, though, very, very hard to take down. He's a short, compact, stocky guy in the weight class, and I don't think you're getting this guy down and holding him down. Aljamain Sterling's usually amazing at getting to guys' backs and keeping control of the guys and locking in body triangles, and he had trouble getting that off on Jimmy Rivera, so I don't think Peter Yan's going to get that done. I think the fight will, for the majority, be a striking match. And I give the straight boxing advantage to Rivera, but I give the overall package of striking and pressure game to Yan. And the guy has a lot of momentum behind him. He's a fucking savage Siberian guy, and I really just can't see the guy losing right now. It's hard to see Peter Yan taking a loss from anybody in the division right now. I think he's a future champion, to be honest. I think he's going to keep winning and get up there. And I think, we'll see if, guys like Moraes, Cejudo, Sterling, Munoz, one of those guys could beat him possibly. But I don't see Rivera taking this guy out. Although Rivera's probably gonna want to get big revenge and put on a great performance, especially after his last fight. Those kind of guys to fight are dangerous. When they're coming off embarrassing performances or bad losses, they want to get back in there and get redemption. So I'm not just pushing Rivera to the side and saying Yan's going to run through him, but I just think Yan's going to get the job done. I think overall he's diligent, he's aggressive, he's pressure, and he's got power in the hands, and he's a finisher. So I'm going with Peter Yan. I think he's going to get a late TKO. Let's talk a little about Aljamain Sterling and Pedro Munoz. Sterling, obviously, like I said before, in this fight, critical style matchup for Rivera. I think he's a bad style matchup for Munoz. Munoz performs better against guys that are aggressive, that are boxers, that want to just stand in the pocket and exchange. And Aljo's not that guy. He's a smart fighter, an elusive fighter, and he has range. He's a little bit taller. He's got long legs. He's got the dexterity, like I said before. He gets those kicks up there really fast. I've sparred with him. His kicks are very disguised. They're hard to see. He'll get his knee up and then he'll flick a kick up around like Wonder Boy Thompson's karate style. He's fast. He's very unpredictable, hard to catch, hard to find, and he's well-rounded. He's got, his striking game has improved immensely, since he's gotten his head together after the Mariah's fight, and now he's pulling the trigger more than ever, which is interesting. You take a knockout loss, you would think it would go the other way, but Aljo's actually shown he's pulling the trigger more and more since that fight and just letting go and being free in there, and I think that's been a big part of his success. He's a slick grappler. If he gets your back and gets a body triangle, it's pretty much over from there. He's got that rear naked choke. He hit that Suliev stretch submission against Cody Stamann, and Cody Stamann's no joke in the wrestling department as well. So Aljamain's got the overall well-rounded game, more so than Munoz. I think Munoz is going to have a little bit more power, a little bit more finishing ability, but Munoz is going to have to close that distance. He's going to have to cut the cage off and try to keep Aljamain on his back foot. But I think Aljamain's going to try to use his wrestling a lot in this fight. Munoz has that guillotine, and he is a high-level black belt, but we haven't seen him land a lot of other different submissions. Aljamain says he's been training his guillotine defense, and he's very sharp with that, so he knows where to keep his head. He's going to be smart with his positioning and where he lands his takedowns, and I think he's going to try to get the back and try to catch a submission at some point. But striking-wise, he's a guy that outpoints a lot of guys. There's a lot of good strikers, and Pedro Munoz is one of them, knocking out one of the best boxers in the bantamweight division, Cody Garbrandt, with a lot of hand speed. And Pedro Munoz was able to find that punch before Cody, so that says a lot. And Munoz is coming off a lot of great performances, a lot of exciting performances against Brett Johns and against Cody Garbrandt. And he seems to have a lot of momentum behind him too, training at an ATT with a very high-level array of guys. And this is a big pivotal fight for the bantamweight division. I mean, we got two guys that are coming up and trying to get that title fight finally. A lot of storylines here. Marias has fought Aljamain Sterling. Pedro Munoz, he seems to have a lot of personal problems with Aljamain. I don't know if it's stuff that he said about the PEDs or whatnot, but seems like Pedro Munoz is really upset with him and really heated, and that could be either a positive or a negative. If he overcommits and Aljamain uses his elusive lateral movement and outpoints him on the feet, that could be trouble for Pedro Munoz, but it could also be trouble for Aljo if Pedro decides to be very aggressive and cut him off and land those heavy boxing punches. But I give the wrestling edge to Aljo, obviously. I give the power striking edge to Munoz, but I give the overall game, like I was saying before, the overall package to Aljamain Sterling. He's more well-rounded. He mixes it up well. He's changing levels. He's using kicks. He's using feints. He's switching stances. And he's got submissions as well. I mean, he's pretty much a black belt. He doesn't have a black belt, I don't think, but he's pretty much a black belt on the ground. He's training with black belts day in and day out at Serra Jiu-Jitsu, so I don't think that Pedro Munoz is going to catch a submission on him. If Pedro Munoz has any chance in finishing the fight, I really think that it would have to be catching Aljo off guard with a big hook, left hook, right hook, something like that. But I just don't see that happening. Aljo fights too smart right now, and I'm going to go with Aljamain Sterling by decision. I think he'll outpoint him with the striking on the feet, and I think the wrestling will be negated. And I think if anybody gets takedowns, it would be Aljamain. Boom! That's about it for that card. We made some picks. We made some predictions. Broke down some fights. Guys, tweet at MMA Fighting. Tweet at the media. Boom is trying to make some more media appearances. I want some more time on the MMA beats. I want to, make a transition at some point. I love the sport. I love breaking down fights. I think it'll be a great perspective from the fighter's eyes to talk about the sport. So let's get that out there on Twitter. Follow me at BrianBoom135 and follow me on Instagram, BrianBoom135. And please give a thumbs up, a subscription. I fucking love you. And hope to be back in the cage soon. Fucking boom shakalaka. Boom!